The word Sabbath in Hebrew means rest. And there were other Sabbath days in the Bible that were not the fourth commandment. When you go to Colossians chapter 2, verse 14 and 16, look what it says. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances. What is this referring to? This is referring to the law of Moses that's no longer kept. Look what it says in verse 16. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or any new moon or the Sabbath days. See how it's plural. There were other Sabbath days that were not the fourth commandment. You want to keep them? Keep them. But those will no longer have to be kept. There's one that still has to be kept. The fourth of the 10 commandments, which is the Sabbath day, a specific day that God blessed and sanctified. When you go to Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 through 3, this is the seventh day that God rested. He didn't have to make this day, but he stopped and made this day, blessed and sanctified it. Now this day is different than the days that we see in the books of Leviticus. When you go to Leviticus chapter 23, verse 23, it says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying on the seventh month in the first day of the month, you're going to have a Sabbath, a memorial blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. The first day of the month is a different day every month. This is not the fourth commandment. This is not the Sabbath. This is a different Sabbath. This is just another rest day that they had. We see when we go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, God says, let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days, and for years. So the weekly cycle started in Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 2. This is from the beginning of creation, and it hasn't changed. And we see in Genesis chapter 1, days 1 through 6, he says, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the second day, and so on and so forth. He does this for all 6 days, but he doesn't do it for the seventh day. There's a deeper meaning behind that. When you go to 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, it says that one day to the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. This is referring to God's 7,000-year plan for creation. I'm not going to go more in depth with that. I'll make another video covering that. We'll go right back to distinguishing the different Sabbaths from the fourth commandment Sabbath. So the fourth commandment Sabbath was not kept like the other Sabbaths. The fourth commandment Sabbath goes off the weekly cycle that we just established in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. They are kept from evening to evening. And we see an example of this in Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 9. As soon as it began to grow dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath. So you see, the Sabbath is getting ready to be kept right at the coming down of the sun, from evening to evening. We see another example of the fourth commandment being kept from evening to evening in the writings of Josephus. He was a first century Roman and Jewish historian and military leader. He was most famously known for writing a book called The Jewish Wars. And here's a passage from that book on how to keep the fourth commandment. One of the priests stood, of course, and gave a signal beforehand with a trumpet at the beginning of every seventh day in the evening twilight, as also at the evening when that day was finished, as we see there, evening to evening, as giving notice to the people when they were to leave off work and when they were to go to work again. So it's very important not to confuse the different types of Sabbaths. Some Sabbaths were kept on moon cycles. The fourth commandment that God wrote with his finger, not to be confused with the handwritten ordinances of Moses, that was kept on a weekly cycle that's still kept today from evening to evening. So make sure you know the difference between the laws and the difference between the Sabbaths. Make sure you stay in your Bibles and stand on truth at all costs. God is always talking, but you always listening.